Thank you so much for joining us today. As was mentioned earlier, our topic today is the Ukrainian refugee crisis. What should donors know and what's expected this winter? We wish to thank all those donors who have collectively contributed tens of millions of dollars in support of refugees already. The humanitarian crisis that is ahead of us is the topic for today. It's estimated that 7.9 million Ukrainians fled their country, and 8 million were displaced within Ukraine as a result of this war, with nearly 7,000 civilians having been killed. In recent weeks, the war in Ukraine has shifted. The Russian attacks increasing the targeted civilian infrastructure like critical utilities that provided power, heat, and water that makes it much more difficult for survival during winter. Millions of Ukrainians are without power, and officials in cities across Ukraine are encouraging residents to evacuate. According to Ukraine's Deputy Minister of Internal Affairs, 520 cities, towns, and villages are facing power supply problems as a direct result of these attacks. With frigid winter temperatures already upon us, Ukrainians may face the coming months without reliable heat, power, or water. Last month, I had the privilege of visiting with our charity partners in Warsaw, Poland, and we have some of those folks here with us today as experts to share with you the eye-opening information that I received just last month. Today, we've brought together 3 experts from our charity partners to discuss the current humanitarian crisis and the one that winter is facing. They will share with you what their organizations have done to help Ukrainians that are in need now and to prepare for the winter months ahead. And as we discuss what is being done to help Ukrainians, we also want to ask each of you to consider what part you will play in helping those who most are in need. First, it's my privilege to welcome our first speaker. The Polish Center for International Aid, PCPM, is a non-governmental organization whose mission is to provide humanitarian aid, development programs, medical relief, assistance throughout the world while maintaining the basic principles of humanitarianism, impartiality, neutrality, and independence. I am pleased to welcome Dr. Wojtek Wilk, PCPM's CEO, to this conversation. Dr. Wilk is a team leader of PCPM's Type 1 emergency medical team and supervises PCPM's aid operations in refugee crises, as well as development programs. Before leading PCPM, Dr. Wilk worked with the United Nations Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, serving in regions that were experiencing crisis or recovering from natural disasters. Dr. Wilk, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you start us off by providing us with a quick briefing on the humanitarian crisis facing Ukraine?
Well, good evening from Warsaw, Mr. Hart. I hope you can hear me well.
I can, yes, thank you.
Excellent. That's a very good question. And first and foremost, thank you for having me on the panel, and many thanks for CAF's and US-based donors' support, which is really instrumental in making the whole humanitarian response, especially in Eastern Europe, outside of Ukraine, happen. Because the needs, we are faced with the largest crisis since the Second World War on the humanitarian phase, which is also the biggest challenge to international peace and security and the international world order that we have seen in Eastern Europe since the Second World War. If I may have the next slide, please. So as a quick introduction, PCPM, the Polish Center for International Aid, we combine operations on the development aid, the humanitarian aid, and indeed, as Mr. Hart mentioned, we operate an emergency medical team, which has been very much involved in medical evacuations from Ukraine from the first days of the war. We have gathered a lot of humanitarian experience in the recent years in various humanitarian crises, among others in the Middle East, assisting the Syrian refugees in Lebanon. And I must tell you, I would have never dreamt in my worst nightmares that we would have to use that skill set in our home country, even more so in our home city. but this is exactly what we are faced since February this year. Next slide, if I may. Also on the situation in Ukraine, this is a map which is a combination of a map and like an internet gig, because this is a mock indication how the Russians war plans have gone. As you can see, the pincers in February were supposed to cut Ukraine in half. And Ukraine is about half of the size of Texas. So still, this is a large chunk of the territory. With every passing month, Russia's war objectives were stymied, and the war objectives were smaller and smaller. And currently, we are looking at the main fighting pretty much localized, where you have the November and December arrow. So Russia's objective was to gain all of Ukraine. Now they are really bogged down, and they are not winning militarily by far. And this is why they are reverting to aspects that border on, to activities that border on war crimes, that are war crimes, but they are also border on genocide. Next slide, if I may. Because what Russia has embarked on since October this year is to target civilian infrastructure, especially power plants, electricity distribution grid, pumping stations for water, pumping stations for sewage, hospitals, all the critical infrastructure, in order to, and those arrows may indicate, create a mass exodus of civilian population that has not fallen under the Russian occupation. The population of Ukraine is about 40 million. So there is still a huge potential of additional displacement in the middle of the winter. And the Russia's objective by bombarding critical infrastructure, not only the power plants, because we should remember that in Eastern Europe, the power plants also provide heating to the cities, but also other areas of critical infrastructure is to really depopulate much of Ukraine, break the Ukraine's resolve to stand up to Russia, but also create a lot of political havoc in Europe, in the European Union, and to stymie European Union's support to Ukraine. So there are multiple objectives, and unfortunately, the Russians have played the same type of war crime activity in Syria. I have seen it with my own eyes when the Russian Air Forces was bombarding hospitals and other critical infrastructure areas. Unfortunately, what is being done in Ukraine is on a massively larger scale as compared to Syria. Next slide, if I may. This photo that you can see, it comes from one city of Kharkov, marked with the circle on the map. Kharkov is a city of 1.5 million, and this is just a part of the pile of rockets and cluster bombs that have been fired on the city. So people have lived under incredible bombardment, and that has not only targeted the critical infrastructure, but also obviously apartment buildings and other civilian facilities, as you have seen in the media. Next slide, please. So the picture that you can see to the left is a village close to our heart, because this is a village of Kamianka, south of Izium, which is pretty close now to the front line, is the village where we as PCPM have rehabilitated a school in 2016. Right now, as you can see, the level of damage is comparable to what you may have seen in the war movies from the Second World War. The villages are obliterated. Well, now the winter is very much with us. In Eastern Ukraine, the temperature is going to drop to well below -20 Fahrenheit, well below -30 centigrade. And those who are staying in those destroyed buildings have no way to survive. So therefore, they have to be evacuated. They have to be brought not only to safety, but to the place where they can survive the winter, because in the destroyed areas of Eastern Ukraine, they cannot survive the winter. Next slide, if I may. So what I'll touch quickly on what we are doing in Eastern Ukraine, but the priority is to support the evacuation of civilians, because especially elderly people who didn't have the means and resources to leave their homes, they now have to leave because there is no heating, no electricity, no water, no no any provisions. But in the cities, the Ukrainian government is trying to create tents or shelters where people could literally warm up because there is no heating in their homes. They could charge their phones because there is no electricity, could get some hot food and drinks because there is no way to cook inside of the houses. But they call those points the points of steadfastness. It's pretty clumsy translation into English, but it sounds pretty nice in Ukrainian. And it implies that people are steadfast in front of the Russian aggression, and they will stay put because the Putin wants them to leave their houses. Next slide, is, if I may. The one aspect that we should remember is that the levels of the war crimes committed by Russia is incredible. I mean, I have seen many wars. I have not seen as many war crimes as we have seen in Ukraine over the last 10 months. And among them, 1.5 million Ukrainians have already been deported into Russia, and as many as 50,000 children have been separated by their parents and sent nobody knows where into Russia to be adopted by Russian families and turned into Russian subjects. I mean, that's the type of the war crimes we haven't seen in Eastern Europe since the Second World War. And well, this is where CAF is also bringing a huge difference. And next slide, if I may. CAF with us is helping to some of those lucky Ukrainian refugees who are first abducted into Russia, and now they are finding their way on their own to the border of Latvia, as you can see on the map, to get there, get the assistance, and together with CAF, we are providing them with immediate assistance on the Russian border, and then bringing them on to the safety of the European Union. I'm pretty much aware that I may be showing you a lot of small countries in Eastern Europe, but as you can see, we are looking into the operations over a large geographical areas. And sometimes in order to bring people out of the harm's way, we have to go around various countries and find not the most direct way in. I hope this is a pretty, I mean, that's the introduction on the situation of Ukraine that we have prepared, Mr. Hart.
Incredible the effort that you have underway as an organization. And we're all incredibly impressed. As the war in Ukraine continues, and sadly, we're looking at a 1-year anniversary for this war. Ukrainian refugees have really no end in sight for when they will be able to return home and to rebuild their lives. What challenges do you see for refugees facing an attempt to integrate into Polish society in the medium and long term, since they don't know when they can go home?
Well, if maybe the next slide will provide a bit of an answer. Poland is blessed with a pretty strong labor market. So the main challenge that normally the refugees are facing which is a shortage of any means of employment, any means of livelihood. It's not very much the case here. But as you can see on the screen, the refugee population, be it in Poland, be it in other countries of Eastern Europe, is not exactly as the type of refugees you may see. In Eastern Europe, such countries such as Poland, almost all of the refugees are either women or children. So the needs of women, especially women with small children, and the needs of children have to take prominence. So I'm extremely grateful to CAF who are supporting our flagship program of employing over 1,500 Ukrainian teachers in the Polish schools, and the Polish schools have taken in at least 200,000 Ukrainian children. Those Ukrainian teachers are providing just a welcoming zone of safety and confidence for the Ukrainian refugee children who sometimes come completely traumatized from the war. And I remember them back in April or May, where the kids were shaking. They were very unsure about their next weeks. Right now, I see them laughing. I see them playing. It's a completely different change. And this is where you, ladies and gentlemen, contribute and give those children not only the stability, not only the education, not only the future, but also the safety that we can give them in Poland. Next slide, if I may. I was actually supposed to connect to this session from the CAF supported Ukrainian curriculum school in Poland. I mean, we don't necessarily need the Ukrainian children to all of them to be integrated into the Polish education system. Some of them really are very much eager to return home. Some, and therefore, the children are still trying to stay in their home curriculum in following education in their own language. And thanks to CAF, we can do it by, among others, opening Ukrainian curriculum schools in Poland. One of them is supported by CAF in Warsaw. We obviously struggle with finding a proper space to have an Ukrainian school. It's not that we have empty school buildings in Warsaw or in other city in Poland, but we find empty spaces in office buildings and other buildings that we can rent. And as you can see, the results are quite promising. I mean, when I see the teenagers and the kids running around laughing and behaving like normal kids, I mean, for me, this is the best see I can, the best view, the best appreciation of what CAF and other humanitarian partners have been supporting us. Next slide, if I may. What we are concerned of is that we may see another wave of refugees. And PCPM has had a very tangible experience in running refugee transit centers in the first wave of refugees. And currently, we are operating a very large medical evacuation hub right next to the Ukrainian border, so that the persons, especially civilians who are wounded in the Russian strikes or they are going through very difficult diseases, can be evacuated for treatment in the hospitals in the European Union. And some of them are being evacuated from the airport and from our medical evacuation hub as far as the US and Canada. Next slide, if I may. So to wrap up, the priorities in Ukraine that I can see, and I allowed myself to highlight a few bullet points, is literally to help the civilians survive this winter. I mean, we are like in this Game of Thrones situations where the winter is coming, but this is not funny for us. I mean, this winter is a deadly winter, and people need all the types of assistance they can. So if you can spare a warm thought of anybody, spare a warm thought of those poor souls in Ukraine who need food, generators, heaters, fuel, blankets, and everything else. We hope to support, together with CAF, those points of steadfastness of whatever way we will call them, so that people could get some hot food, get some a way to warm themselves up, charge their phones, even as they are staying put in their homes because they do not want to leave their home areas despite of the Russian bombardment. But for some of them, there will be no way of staying home, and they need to be evacuated to the safe areas. But we are also extremely appreciative of CAF's assistance in Poland and other countries of Eastern Europe, such as Latvia, who are way safer than Ukraine. Thank you very much for supporting the continued deployment of Ukrainian doctors and teachers who are helping Polish public services extend those services to almost 1.5 million refugees in Poland. There may be a need in case of a new influx to set up more of a transit and mass accommodation sites. And those, for us in Eastern Europe, the experience of being abducted into Russia, it brings us back the memories of 1940s, where 1.5 million Poles, hundreds of thousands of people from Baltic states, millions of Ukrainians were deported into Siberia, and we are dreaded to see the same right now. So the ability of those people to be assisted, at least where we can reach them, like on Russia's border, at least this is far more that could be done to those poor souls in the 1940s. So I'm leaving you with this post stamp from the Ukrainian Post with the Santa Claus hugging a kid. Well, maybe a Santa Claus will come to some of those people. I hope so.
Well, we hope so too. And before we let you go, I do want to just ask you to just help our audience understand sort of the trajectory of how we've gotten to where we are right now with refugees. So if I understand correctly, and thank you again for the wonderful tour that you gave us of the sites in Warsaw when we were visiting there, and really eye-opening for the donors that are with us today. And so when you thank CAF, you're thanking the donors who make all that resource available. Right. So at the beginning of the war, mass exodus of people, millions of people leaving Ukraine, millions of people displaced within their own country. And then my understanding is, and help us just understand what's happened here, many people went back into Ukraine, and which might, to those of us who are not in Ukraine or not in the war zone, might sound like, why would you go back into a war zone? And what I understand is that they want to populate the country because Putin wants them to leave. And so it's better for the country in terms of long term and for their strategy to have people there. But of course now they're there in a deadly winter that no one expected would have the power shut off and the heat shut off because of the way that Putin is running this war. So is that the situation that we're in right now? Is that a lot of people have gone back specifically because they want to, strategic purposes for the country, but now they're sort of caught in this horribly deadly winter?
Well, over the course of the last months, not more than 20% of refugees have returned from Poland into Ukraine, because vast majority of them, and especially those who stayed in Poland, are those from Eastern Ukraine, and for many of them, their houses are gone or are completely destroyed. What we already are starting to see the first stages of the new exodus from Ukraine. I mean, now there are much more people registering for public services, coming out of the blue saying, well, I have arrived again into Poland. So for some cases, are people who have come back due to their work, due to their family obligations. Now they are bringing back again with their whole families, knowing that they cannot survive the winter. But if the public services in a city such as Kiev, 3 million, in a city such as Dnipro or Odessa, or there are several cities around 1 million in Ukraine. If the public services in those places should break down, that is going to generate a very significant wave of refugees. I mean, UNHCR is estimating that the new wave of refugees into Poland may be about 800,000. I personally believe it may well be between 2 and 3 million. Compared to about 2 million in February and March this year. So we are definitely not out of the woods. We have all the contingency plans set up, but Poland and this part of Europe, we are pretty much already saturated with refugees. So we, as you can say, we hope for the best, we plan for the worst. And again, we are extremely appreciative of CAF's and CAF's partners and donors' assistance, because the Americans are making the change in Eastern Europe.
Well, we very much appreciate that. Let's go to the next slide. Polish Humanitarian Action is a humanitarian nonprofit organization based in Warsaw, Poland. For almost 30 years, they have delivered humanitarian aid to people around the world who are suffering due to armed conflicts and natural disasters. They offer a variety of programming around disaster relief, water and food services, shelter, and education. Our speaker from PA is Beata Dolińska, and Beata supervises aid activities and program implementation in Ukraine and Poland. She has worked in the humanitarian and development sector for more than 10 years, with a focus on access and quality of education, access to water and sanitation services, food and livelihood. And welcome, Beata. Obviously, you are right in the middle of the most difficult time for many of these refugees. And we know that you're conducting work in Ukraine and that you serve the refugee populations in Poland. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience providing aid in each of these areas, and what are the types of aid that you're delivering, and what are the needs of these people?
All right, thank you very much for the invitation for this webinar. And yes, I can tell a bit more. If you maybe can put the slides as well, then I can maybe next one. This one you already mentioned about PH generally, but what does PH do in Ukraine? As you said, like we're working both in Poland and Ukraine. the current response. And in Ukraine, we have been there already since 2014. So since the first war that started already before. And currently we expanded our presence and activities basically across the country, as you can see from the map. And in terms of locations, Kiev, Dnipro, Kharkiv, Kramatorsk, everywhere basically by the front line as well. We are working there quite a lot, either directly by ourselves or with lots of partners on the ground. So we need to underline that the amount of work also that the local organization, national organizations are putting into the response to basically voluntary response as well to their in the country, it's huge, and basically we're supporting them and giving them the tools and products to basically do the work that is needed. So we since the beginning basically of the current war, we focus on delivering food products. So initially, because of the market was quite disrupted, we started moving everything from Poland. So we have 123,677 people that we reached with this food kits that either there was a different types of food that was either for people that were moving still and they could just have at least something to eat, or as well for some people to be able to cook at least for a month or so. So they since there was no access to shops and anything was not available in the market, then we were able to at least deliver some foods directly to them. Basic hygiene products, that's also something that's majority of the people, especially the elderly that or in the eastern part of the country, then we're able to support them, the families with this hygiene products, about 45,000 people. One of the biggest kind of approach to support is basic needs support through cash response. This is a general kind of most common type of assistance in many of the conflict areas. As well as we are continuing to support actually with shelters, so any type of either reconstruction of the houses or also establishing the container houses. This is at possible mainly around Kiev and Kiev region where lots of houses were destroyed, and Bucha, Buzhova, as you may have heard, and different surrounding villages around there. This areas became a bit more stable, at least right now, so less attacks than on the front line and the east parts. So this is the stable enough to at least be able to rebuild the houses that were damaged and establish some containers so people at least have some place to be for the winter time. And we're putting also a big focus on the mental health support. So focusing on children, elderly, and adults. And this is across the country, basically for the whole population. Some type of psychological support psychological first aid is the key focus. Next slide, please. And in Poland itself, what we have been doing since the beginning, basically, of the conflict, as it was mentioned in some of the discussions, that about 8 million people actually passed through Polish border itself. There was initially 8 crossing borders between Ukraine and Poland, and Polish Humanitarian Action was present at 4 of them. In Hreben, Zosin, Dorochowsk, Przemyśl, all the difficult names, I'm sure for non-English speakers. And this was where we as PH were there with basic kind of support as hot meals for people that were waiting for 20-30 hours sometimes at the border sites. Any blankets, any changing rooms for and hygiene products for the children and women. So changing rooms also for women to be able to change the children. Currently, also we expanded a lot of activities that's in Poland, supporting 36 locations across the country with mental health support for children and mainly for children, also for the adults on some more an aspect of actually explaining like what kind of traumas different and what kind of behaviors could result with different types of traumas. We have launched a big component of actually basic needs support with cash. That's one of the main kind of and best responses that is recommended and was recommended in Poland. So people are able actually to use the funds to cover their own needs, whatever they need yes, and currently like the big focus is also on securing the accommodation. A lot of people still are staying in more collective centers or common centers. Some people obviously that had some family linkages or also are able to rent some apartments, then they do it themselves, but a lot of people still don't have this possibility, and in terms of the accommodation is quite limited. So we're trying to push forward a little bit more that people are able to be accommodated a bit more. And also in terms of job placement, as Dr. Wilk said, the job market is quite okay in Poland, but so for the basic kind of labor, it is possible for people to find jobs, but we're looking into more adjusting how people can find the jobs within their kind of area of work as well, so they can because that's also connected to the scale of the salary that they can earn, and to be able actually to sustain themselves a bit more. And there's a huge niche with PH is also doing in terms of global education, which means more building a bit more tolerance for this multicultural kind of situation that we are at right now. Because within a few months, we have currently about 1.5 million Ukrainian people in Poland, and that's quite I mean, big number all at once, and there's a need for actually making sure that the Polish society is well accepting of this type of diversity just that happened overnight, basically. So a lot of kind of integration work that we're trying to do within schools, within general public as well. Yes. Next slide, please. I think in terms of current situation, we talked about this a little bit, but in terms of the needs, as you asked, in Poland itself, we're looking at access to accommodation to be able to move from more collective centers to more individual housing, more integration within education system. That's as Dr. Wilk said as well. Depends on obviously people still have this mindset of going back and now trying to integrate children in the educational system. It's still unsure how to approach it, considering that families or have this mindset that they may come back, but still integration is adjusting the education system a little bit to this integration is quite needed. Integration within job market, as I mentioned as well, placement for more specialized professionals, and to some extent continuous cash support for basic needs, especially for rent, for any kind of increased cost of energy and heating, especially for the new families and new people that may be arriving in this winter time right now as well. In terms of challenges, I mean, we have healthcare, education, employment, financial assistance that is available for Ukrainian citizens in Poland, and it was open since the beginning of the conflict. But we can see that the system right now is a bit overwhelmed. Also, as within, like I said, few months, we have 1.5 million people. So sometimes the services for some of these components are quite slow, and this creates maybe a little bit tension between also Polish citizens and Ukrainian citizens. Integration with social protection systems still is in the process, and that will probably take some time as well. And obviously, I mean, we have I would say quite good support of in terms of funding the activities, and we can see great kind of involvement of American society or all over Europe. We get lots of different individuals and the donors that are supporting our activities. but we know that this is a wave of let's help right now, but what's going to happen later. So, yeah.
I just wanted to sort of last question there, exactly where you're going is, lots of people supporting, see the immediate need, unjust war, people who, did not bring this upon themselves, suddenly having their entire lives disrupted. And, I think it's natural over time that there can be sort of donor fatigue, people who, have given. And so it's incredible the work that PAH is doing. And can you help our donors who want to support but also need to answer questions to people who what is the impact? Why does it really matter that they give again? What's happening now that is the urgency for donors to maybe consider giving again?
I mean, I think all of the obviously the first wave of the biggest needs is sometimes has a short-term results. Yeah, we are focusing. I mean, as an organization, we are focusing on making sure that yes, we help right here, right now, with basic food, with basic access to what people need right here, right now. But we have in mind already, like the next steps, how we can make it more sustainable, how we can make sure that people don't rely only on social system, don't rely only on our support. So this is whether in Poland or in Ukraine, that's the main focus. I mean, connecting people to the job market, making sure that they basically come into this to the workforce system and they don't rely so much on the social system and any kind of other organizational support. So yes, I mean, long term, like we're hoping the next 1-2 years basically focus on making sure that people become a bit more sustainable. If they decide to stay in Poland, they're basically good enough to manage themselves.
Become easier there, but the rebuilding. So thank you very much. And next slide, please. People in Need is a Czech nonprofit. Next slide beyond that. Let's go to, let's keep, I think we're going in the wrong direction. Keep going. Please, there we go. So People in Need is a Czech nonprofit, non-governmental organization that provides emergency relief to people around the world during natural disasters or major crises, as well as delivering long-term aid to people living in poverty. In addition to humanitarian aid, People in Need implements development programs, education and social integration programs, and provides human rights support in areas of need. We're joined today by Erika Dvořáková, who is the People in Need's country program coordinator for Ukraine. Very big job, Erika. She coordinates the implementation teams that provide much needed humanitarian assistance in the areas of shelter and winterization, which is the topic that we have today, cash assistance, partnership, and localization, education, and much more. So Erika, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. And I know our audience is going to be keenly interested to know more about your work. You supported the work that's directly helping Ukrainians still within the country, as well as refugees who have fled to the Czech Republic. Can you tell us about the type of aid that People in Need has successfully delivered to people who have remained in the Ukraine, and what has your experience in providing relief been so far?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ted, for the introduction and also for the opportunity to be here in this panel and to share our experiences and the support that we are providing to the Ukrainian people. Can I ask for the next slide, please? Yeah, so as Ted has already shared, People in Need is a Czech international organization providing the humanitarian aid as well as development support. And I guess that we can go to the next slide directly. So here, I think it will be very, it's a great opportunity to add to the points that Beata, Dolińska, and Mr. Dr. Wilk was sharing, because we will have like an overall idea of what is actually happening in Ukraine and what kind of support is needed, and what are the needs also, what needs are covered. Also thanks to CAF and American donors. So for the PIN, the PIN side in Ukraine, people in need in Ukraine has been present in Ukraine since 2003, and we have started providing the humanitarian aid to the vulnerable people after the 2014 with the first Russian aggression. And of course, we have scaled up our activities this year tremendously. And currently we are present in 17 regions, but over the last few months, we have been present in all 24 regions across Ukraine, providing support through our local staff. We have more than 290 staff currently on the ground, and the team is expanding, trying to cover all the needs in the regions where we are. Thanks to the support from CAF and also from the donors from the US, we have been able up till now to cover more than 500,000 people in Ukraine with the current and the emergency support that was really needed. For the activities that we are doing right now, I would like to ask for the next slide. So if I would start with what People in Need has been focusing and is trying still to deliver, is to provide an immediate need and targeted need. So as the invasion has started on the 24th of February, People in Need has been already able to provide large cargoes of humanitarian aid 3 days after the start of the war. And in this beginning, we have basically provided this humanitarian aid through trains and trucks from the Czech Republic that was imported to Ukraine. But what is also important in this humanitarian crisis is to be flexible and to look into the needs of the local market. So as the situation has developed, we have actually understood and noticed that the main material items that are needed on the ground we are able to purchase them inside of Ukraine on the local market, so that as to mention, from July 2022 onwards, People in Need have not been importing any items to Ukraine, and has helped the market in this way to purchase in the different regions to be able to deliver it to the areas which were in need and at that moment. From the beneficiaries that we are serving, from the people that we have identified as the most vulnerable, we are targeting the households, individuals, but as well as collective centers. So collective centers that are hosting the internally displaced people that do not have any place where to stay, or they couldn't stay in their regions. So People in Need is supporting these collective centers with the in-kind assistance, material assistance, as well as cash assistance, and also, as it was mentioned before, with the social, psychosocial support, psychological first aid, and any other protection support that the people need, because they have endured these difficult situations and are still coping with that. Another point that we are focusing, and it is really necessary, is the cash assistance. So the main tool that we are using is the multi-purpose cash assistance, which is basically making the people, giving people the possibility to use the cash openly, and they because they are the ones who know what they really need and what is the need for them to buy. I would like to ask for the next slide, because on the next slide I am focusing on the shelter and on the winterization needs. as we have mentioned, the winter is already here, it's already in Ukraine. And so what are the needs, how we are covering the needs for the winter? We are providing people with the winterization items, clothes, heating stoves. Another tool that we are using and that we are really focusing on is that we are repairing houses medium repairs. So right now we are repairing 9,000 houses, nurseries, and other buildings. Another point how we are helping to provide for the winterization needs is we are providing emergency shelter kits, which are basically a simplified version of the support, so that each of the family, and we can basically reach more people who are in need. So this is very important that the most people can access and can have some kind of shelter improvement. And we are, of course, covering these needs by cash assistance to other people.
Can I ask you, Erika, what sort of challenges are you facing in transporting humanitarian supplies to refugees and to medical responders, working so broadly across the country?
So the challenges that we are facing right now are connected with the winter, with the electricity cuts, and with the energy instability. So our teams are trying to make sure that they can provide the support to those who are needed. And we have currently been notified by the fact that, for example, our beneficiaries who are our beneficiaries of the cash assistance do not have can have difficulties with getting information about where we will be able to provide them cash assistance, because they do not know if the cash assistance can be provided through because of the very frequent power cuts. So these are, for example, also a communication and information challenges that we are facing due to the instability of the energy supply and the electricity power cuts.
Thank you. Get you back to your slides, and then we'll have our final questions.
Yeah, maybe just very shortly, we are providing support also in Czech Republic. In Czech Republic, there has been 240,000 refugees that came to Czech Republic from Ukraine, and People in Need is supporting them with psychosocial support through a helpline, which is receiving regular calls. We are also providing support through counseling on accommodation and on employment. And as well, we are cooperating with municipalities and schools so that the integration and adaptation to the Czech environment can go smoothly.
You want to go to the next slide? Yeah.
Yes, and then I can mention a few major needs that we have right now identified in Ukraine. So, as mentioned, we are focusing on the shelter repairs and on winterization, as this is now the most and current urgent need, as we're trying to support the most people that are in this need. But in line with this, I would also mention that there is a necessity for psychosocial support for people who are coming or who are in the newly liberated and newly accessible areas, and this will be a need that we have identified since the beginning of the war. But of course, it will be still ongoing, and there is more and more need for these teams of psychologists who can reach the people in the areas that they need. And for the if I can just mention something from the outlook for the next few months, there will be a necessity for preparing for recovery and reconstruction stage, for example, focusing on livelihood and the local markets.
We certainly want to be very hopeful for that recovery. I'd like to thank everybody for the opportunity to have you with us here today. The information that you've provided has helped us gain a more nuanced understanding of the current state of humanitarian response in Ukraine and the surrounding countries. Before we wrap up today, I'd like to ask a final question and have each of you respond specifically to the donors that work with CAF America and are interested in helping those that are most in need because of this conflict. So speaking to those donors, what is the most important thing for the international community to understand about the crisis at this moment? Let's start with you, Erika, and then we'll go to Beata and then Dr. Wilk.
Yeah, thank you so much for this question. So I think what is really important to know is that this conflict now has been ongoing for 9 months, and it will still be ongoing. So it's not something that will end right now, and the needs of the people will continue even further. So we should be looking for we should be looking into the needs of the people, and also trying to see not only according to what is mentioned in the news, but the people are living in Ukraine and through this period ongoing, and their needs are still there, and will be even increasing if this continues.
Thank you. Beata, over to you. What's the most important thing for the international community to understand about this crisis right now?
Yes, I mean, I have the same opinion as Erika, that for sure, I mean, we were all hoping in the beginning that it will end soon, but it's clear now that it will continue for quite some time, and the needs will be there for years to come. And we understand very much that people are tired of or maybe tired of continuing to fund this and support this. I mean, we see as Polish society as well, for the last 9 months, people were working, volunteering outside of the work as well, and committing their time to support as much as possible. But this will not end I mean, the needs will be there for the Ukrainian families. I mean, we may be tired because we're helping extra and volunteering extra, but this is, at the end, we go back home and we can sleep in a warm house and we're fine, yeah. But these families will still need lots of support for years to come. And the approach should be, and we have this approach that we want to make it as the help that we give, we want to make it as sustainable as possible, so people can help themselves. And we see that there is this willingness of people actually to do the job. It's not that they're waiting for handouts and all of this. They are ready to do the work, but obviously we need to help them a little bit.
And Dr. Wilk, speaking specifically to the international community, what do you want them to understand about this crisis right now?
Well, I'm very happy to be out of the UN, so I can speak more bluntly and directly. This is a fight of an autocracy that has breached all the tenets of the international law, has launched a war of territorial conquest, has done tremendous amount of war crimes and crimes that are now bordering on genocide. And all the baddies of the world are watching. Iran is watching, China is watching, others are watching, because if Putin manages to win over Ukraine and even importantly, win over Ukraine because the West will falter, the whole domino effect is going to start, and we will be seeing the end of Pax Americana. We'll be seeing the end of reasonable stability in the world, and the mayhem is going to start. So this is why the engagement of the United States, this is why the engagement of the global West is so important. It's so important to maintain it. And this is why I'm so extremely gracious to CAF donors, because here the engagement of the private donors, of the corporate donors, really makes a difference. In case of Czechia, in case of Poland, those countries are considered, developed countries, but we still don't have the means, the financial means to respond to such huge refugee crisis. So the traditional funding mechanisms focus on Ukraine, and rightly so, yet your support in places like Latvia, like Poland, like Czechia, is really making a massive, massive difference.
I'm going to stay with you, Dr. Wilk, and then we'll go back around one final question before we wrap up today. You've seen crisis around the world, and you've seen societies recover from that, and it's a difficult process. What lies ahead, and why do donors need to be engaged now so that there is a future for Ukraine?
Well, donors have to be engaged because the Putin is exactly counting on the Western societies to get bored, to get tired, to wanting to go back to the business as usual. Yet he has breached all the bases of any basis of as usual. So Ukrainians are extremely sturdy people. They will survive this winter. They will survive this war. They will go back to the destroyed villages. Will stay there against all odds. But really, if there had been no support from the West, from the United States, from Poland, from other countries in the West to Ukraine, the Ukraine would falter like will fall like a deck of cards already a few months ago. We have managed to do something that nobody expected, all of us together. And now we have to persevere. Winter is going to be a critical time. We all hope that spring and summer is going to bring some hope. But indeed, well, that's Ukrainians are fighting for their freedom, but they're also fighting for the global peace and stability that is really a threat. And at the end of the day, if this falls, everybody's going to suffer.
Thank you, Beata. Over to you. What's at stake here for donors to stay engaged?
As I agree also with what Dr. Wilk said, but I think we can already see like the effect that actually the war in Ukraine had on the rest of the world. We see how much it affected a lot of food deliveries or food supplies in different parts of the world. So that this also has been disrupted. So it's not only conflict in Ukraine and affecting only Ukraine and even neighboring countries. It's affected the price increase all over Europe, all over the world, and it will have lots of consequences for years to come for the whole world. So I think it's super important to have this commitment still and cooperation on trying to address the current needs and rebuilding the country to also rebuild a bit of a balance in different parts of the world that we never thought that actually it's connected so much. Yeah.
Thank you, Beata. And final word over to you, Erika. What's at stake here for donors to stay engaged?
Yeah, so I would go in line what Dr. Wilk and Beata Dolińska also mentioned. We need to for the donors. It is important also to understand what the Ukrainians are coming through currently, and not only in Ukraine but also in the other countries. So the support that is given to Ukraine is giving the hope and also some kind of out view of trying to keep going and to have this will and the power to go through. So I think this is very important also as a sign for the overall society.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who's joining us today. On behalf of CAF America, we want to thank you so much for your support of the Ukrainian refugees and urge you to stay connected. As our speakers have shared with you today, they're on the ground, their staff members are on the ground making a difference. And so we want to thank you for joining us and for everything that you might do to help Ukrainian refugees. That's the end of our webinar for today. Thank you all. Bye now.